sometimes the towers actually do launch. So there's definitely a joke here about like this is how Elon achieves reusability on Mars or something. But
Bring the tower with you, as it turns out. It was easy. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Feature Crew. Today we got a really special show. We're going to be doing a video generation tool instead of living in kind of code and text land like we've been doing lately. We're going to do some video prompts, see how good video generation is. This time we're focusing on Kling AI. Jake has been poking around a little bit at it, and we're gonna take a look.
Okay, cool. So I got us set up in the Kling AI studio. There are free generation credits for new accounts, so we're gonna just try to work our way through some of these free credits. Our first prompt is inspired by some of the videos that we saw in the Sora release paper that circulated the internet a couple months ago. And we picked the one where there are a bunch of woolly mammoths running through snow. That'll let us see both how the model recreates the animals and their movement, and also how it recreates like the physics of both light and gravity interacting with the snow.
Looks like we're looking at about 10 credits a video. That's still pretty good. So you're getting like 6 video generations.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 7 if you just get a free account. So definitely try it out.
And then we also have. So I'll send it off and get it generating. Okay, guys. So this is taking forever to load. So, I mean, it's probably been, what, guys, like 10 minutes now? More? Almost 20?
Oh, yeah, over 20.
What we're going to do is we're going to run a bunch of these, and then we'll cut the video. We'll come back with a bunch of them generated. You've seen the UX now. You've seen what the Kling AI portal looks like, and then we can come back with a bunch of generated videos and show them off. Dylan may or may not be able to make it, and you'll find out in a second. So we're back. We unfortunately lost Dylan, but we did gain about 10 AI-generated videos here. So we'll start going through them with that woolly mammoth one that we were generating. And this is generated with the new Kling 1.5 model. We have some examples with both the newest model and their most recent model.
Awesome. All right, we have mammoths.
I'll give it a play. So one of the things that I'm looking at is like particularly paying attention to how the mammoth's feet interact with the snow. I'm also kind of looking at the atmosphere and the clouds moving above the mammoths. I think it's kind of interesting that there are clearly 2 layers of atmosphere, whether those lower ones are supposed to be clouds or dust. It kind of gives a cool look.
Looking at the limbs here, I mean, it looks like the limbs are staying pretty consistent from what I can see. That's
one interesting thing. One interesting thing is that, like, on the left, you see the sun like peek out behind the tree, but the camera's not moving. So that's like a really weird artifact of a lot of shots where the camera does move and the sun will peek out behind something.
It's a good call out because the sense of time isn't working there, right? Because for the sun to move that quickly, these mammoths be walking extremely slow, right?
right.
Glacial speed.
But like you were saying, I think that the animation, like, I don't know what to call it other than animation, but like their walk animation is pretty impressive.
Yeah, the movement's looking great.
Like if I was playing a video game and the mammoths walked around like this, I'd be like, oh, I might notice that they're not the best animations, but I also might not. I might just walk by the mammoth.
Yeah, and it's a super interesting thing with video models where the fidelity's there. And so you'd have to get nitpicky on whether or not it looks accurate to what these things would have looked like. But even just rendering a scene like this 5 years ago would have been almost impossible, right? You would have had to be Weta Studios or a big Hollywood house and take hundreds of hours to render it. Just the movement in the snow, the movement in the sky, the lighting, to your point. I mean, so very impressive to see that. Don't expect it to nail mammoths, but movement looking great. Kicking up snow, looking cool. That's really good stuff.
Yep. So I think like we can move on to another example. This one was actually inspired by the OpenAI Sora announcement blog. It's the Pacific Coast Highway in California.
Nice.
And so it does. I don't know if the viewers have been there, but it does. This is what it looks like. And this is actually supposed to be a specific location along the highway. It's Big Sur. So you might recognize this from the Mac OS default background.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
So it should look familiar, but I thought it did a pretty impressive job. I think we'll edit in a photo of real Big Sur here. And Chris, you'll have to take my word for it, but it did a good job of recreating it. It's not obviously exact, but it was impressive.
And we would expect it to do better on this than, say, the mammoths, because a lot of people have taken a lot of video of Big Sur. There's a lot out there. But the detail continues to be impressive. I mean, all that movement in the water is looking really good.
I think we can do a quick compare here to the same prompt, but on their older model and not on Pro version. So it's lower resolution. Again, it's also a differently framed shot. And it also seems to be a different part of Big Sur slightly. Yeah. I think further down the coast actually. But the consistency between the two is pretty awesome, right? Like you can tell that they're capturing the same location.
Yeah, the detail in the water for the professional one though is definitely a step up. I think one of the things you could expect this to be used for very quickly is B-roll.
Oh yeah,
right. If you ever watch these shows, if you haven't thought about it when you're watching a show, now you will. Go watch your favorite show. When they cut scenes, there's usually these interstitials where usually it's cars driving in Manhattan or there's a coastal movement like this. It feels like that's going to get replaced by these models pretty quickly.
And even before you're seeing these clips in like the final product, this is incredible storyboarding material, right? Like you can lay out your movie.
Yes,
with
great.
Very reasonable looking shots. You used to have to pay animators to do that.
Yep.
People to draw. And now you can have a much higher quality, what they call animatic, for a much potentially lower cost. And then you can even be iterating in this like mock-up basically before you go shoot the real film.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it wasn't very expensive, right? We're talking 35 credits a go for professional mode. Even that's not bad.
I did 1 month of the middle tier, and it was $12 or something, but it was on sale. So I think it's usually like $30 a month or something. It's like $30 for 100 generations, right? So not bad. And maybe that number goes down a little bit on pro mode, but not by much. So I think we can move on to the next one, which is some folks will remember this from the OpenAI, the Sora announcement. There was like an astronaut on a desert planet with his red knit cap.
Yeah.
And so I gave the same prompt to Kling, and it did not interpret it the same way. It wasn't as like cinematic slow walk as the Sora video. It was much more high speed, and the astronaut's like sand surfing here.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it comes into view, and there's like you can kind of see this like. It looks very stable diffusion image stitch. Like the frames don't quite match up with each other, and things look like they're kind of morphing between frames. I wonder if it's like just the amount of camera movement in this scene that's making it hard. But the last one we saw was just so clean, and this is like I see the sand moving.
That's interesting. I wonder if it's the speed you're trying to. It interprets as a really fast shot, so. You got less time between frames.
Just to look at, I think recently we had the Starship tower catch, where if folks haven't seen it, go watch it. Basically, a 20-story building sized rocket was caught by a 40-story building sized tower with big metal arms out of the air.
Life. Like, utterly astounding.
And Kling has a feature where you can take images and then generate a video with that image as the starting frame. And so I wanted to do something fun and give it an image where the real image from last week where the rocket was mid-landing. So I gave it a prompt that was like, this rocket's landing, it's performing a propulsive landing maneuver, and it's getting caught by the tower. And we'll see, what it put together. So it didn't quite...
The rocket's still going up.
It didn't quite understand the rocket's still going up. But even though it didn't understand the movement part of the prompt and the actual action, I was quite impressed by the various like smoke and flames that it got. Like I have a couple more rockets that we can look at, and this one was like by far the most. Like it feels like some of the smoke coming off is moving almost as it should with the rocket's upward motion.
Yeah, it's a weird blend, right? Because it's like, the smoke's going up, but then it's also folding back down. So it has this notion of movement. It's again, really great at particles. We saw that with the Mammoth. Now we're seeing it here with some of the smoke particles. But it can't grasp the physics of what's happening.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
And so to stay on this rocket theme for a minute, if we ask the model to generate like its own, no seed image, its own perception of a rocket launch, like this is what we get. It went for a really large rocket. And it wasn't quite launching, but I have to say, those, again, just hammering home Chris's point about the particle effects, like, those clouds are impressive. That looks like an expensive render job right there.
Yeah, that would be a hugely expensive sim. It's fascinating that it seems like the towers themselves are launching, too. It's like we have 3 rockets launching, right? Like, you have the flames at the peak of the 2 framing towers there.
It's funny. It does kind of look like it's hallucinated a rocket in the middle of the towers, but because you mentioned the towers launching, sometimes the towers actually do launch. So there's definitely a joke here about like this is how Elon achieves reusability on Mars or something. But
Bring the tower with you. As it turns out, it was easy.
but when I tried to generate the launch portion, it decided to launch the tower as well.
So again, really good simulation, but just stumbling on the physics here. That is wild.
So continuing on this fire trend, Meta in their announcement blog for their own video generation model had a very interesting prompt where there was a man sort of spinning fire sticks, and I thought this was a good example of sort of how you can have an effect from one object on another. I mean, we saw that a little bit with the rocket and the smoke, but I could see in vector space they're kind of occupying the same pixels, and so I could see that the connection between those two things comes more easily. But here you see like the light from the handheld flames bleeding onto the beach, sort of all the way towards the edge of the frame, which I thought that was cool, and then even onto the water, and it bleeds only onto the waves that are getting closer, which is like what you would expect in real life as well. So I kind of thought the lighting here was impressive.
The other thing to always check in videos like this is when an object's occluded, does it stay the same? Right? It's a notoriously hard problem that, say, when part of the baton passes over his or behind his forearm, does it stay persistent as the same object, or does it come out of that occlusion looking different?
It's definitely, the occlusion's definitely messing with it. I feel like it almost looks like he's doing like a sleight of hand move, like when the magician.
Yeah, it's like we lose one of the jets. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it looks like it reappears after. So now moving on to some stuff like a little less fantastical. I wanted to see more of how it could do with natural scenes. So we've already seen some animals, but like fur is interesting and difficult to render notoriously. And water, very close-up water, we can start evaluating sort of reflections, right? So this was a prompt borrowed from Meta, but we have a red-faced monkey, and he's playing with a boat in this serene pond sort of setup. And I was pretty impressed by the water here, like at higher detail. You can kind of see some like almost weird water hallucination. I don't know what to call it, or like clipping or unnatural movement on the left over here, but the reflections and how the water moves
Reflections
closer
are
to
good.
the monkey,
Yep.
I think is pretty impressive.
Reflection's really good. To your point about the fur, I'm thinking some of that chin fur should be way wetter coming out of the water than it is.
Right.
But, that's super interesting.
Yeah, honestly, if you look at the edge of like on the arm here of where the fur meets the water, you're not seeing the fur like get wet and clump up and float like it should.
Right.
If anybody's washed a dog.
Yeah, exactly.
And then something kind of similar. This prompt was, I wanted to see how it could replicate like bird movement. I mean, the bird already kind of clipped through the tree there.
Yeah. Teleporting bird.
It's clearly it was harder for it to do the bird movement than it was for it to do the mammoth movement. I wonder if there's like more training data of walking, of like quadrupeds walking than of birds flying close up, or if it was just a difficult movement. But this felt very Da Vinci to do, so here it is.
And you are getting some motion blur, which is cool. So you're seeing motion blur apply to the branches and the trees. So it's understanding that there's speed happening here, and physics still seems to be the hard part.
This one looks like very video game. I don't know how else to describe it, but even the way that the branches kind of faded out of existence when the thing clipped, like it looks very video game. The way it's moving, it almost looks like the feathers aren't quite rendering. It seems to be mixed with animals, right? Like some of them went pretty well. The fur could be impressive at times. This bird is really killing me. So I think a question a lot of people ask is people, and another widely shared video from the Sora announcement was this like woman at night walking through a brightly lit sort of futuristic city.
Yeah.
And so we'll see Kling's attempt. And it almost feels like the Sora one was in the training data watching this. The reflections are pretty impressive.
Reflections are great.
Particularly the people in the background.
It also can't seem to quite decide what the fabric on her dress is. Or if this is like a heavier fabric, you wouldn't expect it to flow as much. And some of the glossiness makes it seem like it's fluctuating between a lighter fabric and a heavier one. Is it meant to be leather? If it's leather, you wouldn't expect it to move quite so flowy.
Yeah. It almost looks like a curtain material, but then the skirt looks like leather.
Right.
And it's confusing. Jacket's definitely leather. Jacket is moving, though, how I would expect a leather jacket to move. I think that's actually impressive.
Yeah, jacket's looking good. The hands getting occluded and coming back seem good.
Which is notoriously difficult. Yep.
Yep.
In this one, it's like the consistency of the people, like they're out of focus in the background, but that's not messing with it, right? Like you can imagine that if it's out of focus, you might see extra blobbing or extra inconsistency. But even when they walk in front of some of these like bokeh out lights, like the way that the light kind of breaks from behind their silhouette as they walk is like pretty realistic.
To Kling's credit, this is out. You can use this, right? Sora is not. You cannot use Sora at will right now.
And you cannot use metas either. So, interestingly, there's a parameter here that I haven't seen mentioned in any of these other videos, and so it's this like creativity versus relevance parameter.
Yeah, the slider.
And so, I tried another OpenAI prompt with the creativity slider all the way up, and it was the like boats in a coffee cup, and the boat's like alive and moving.
Boy,
like it's cursed. Like it looks like a bug.
Oh,
so I just like don't recommend putting the creativity slider too high. This, to be fair, was on the older model. When you run the same prompt on the newer model with a creativity slider in a reasonable spot, it does a better job. Like this one like struggled quite a bit, so you can see like some kind of weird movement with the boats like sinking for no reason.
Yeah, bobbing up and down, a little bobbery versus boat-like.
The person's hands messed up in the background.
A lot of thumbs, just thumbs everywhere.
But then again, it's like, you know, the glossiness and the way that the light is being reflected and sort of bent around the cup is very real.
It's weird that it put boats on the like saucer too.
yeah, like there's
just
a side
some
of
boats on there, like backup saucers.
Yeah.
It's almost like it interpreted them as food. Like you have some weird cracker monument that you're eating.
Yep. And so, you know, we've talked about how occlusion is difficult for these models. Like another thing is sometimes like, and also how movement's been difficult. And so when things are moving and getting occluded, that's like extra difficult. So one of the prompts that OpenAI included in their sort of test set was like walking on a treadmill, and things were kind of occluded in the scene, and the whole thing was very difficult for the model. The person was walking backwards. And so in this case, like it very much, you can see that the guy's moving forward throughout the scene, so much so that the other treadmills are now moving forward as well. And the beams are moving in the background. Like the connection
he's
between
moving through the environment. Oh boy.
Exactly. The connection between the fact that he's running, but the treadmill makes it so that he's staying still, like that physics reasoning, not happening. And it totally messes with the whole system here. And that's not even accounting for the fact that he's like glitching. Like it looks like he's about to exit the Matrix.
He's ascended.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. It's like, oh, he's running, so therefore the scene must pass him. And you're like, well.
And I have to say, at least for me, my eye goes to him first, and so you see him running, and you see the beam pass in the background, and it looks, your brain kind of solves for the difference, and you're like, okay, he's running. And then eventually when your eye makes it to the right side, and that's all stationary, at least my brain like cannot compute what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So, you know, obviously, like, I included this as a particularly difficult situation to show that, like, obviously these things have a ways to go in simulating the world. And like Chris was bringing up earlier, we might need some interesting strategies to get around these limitations. Like, we'll see what scale does and what the traditional strategies that have been used for LLMs do, or are we going to need something special here? Right. I think only time will tell on that one.
I've heard some theories around using game engines, or sort of should there be a level to this where it's rendering the scene and the objects and getting their 3D space and then doing a pass on top for video. I think we'll review it in probably a separate video, but Adobe put out some announcements where they were sort of taking that approach of the objects are placed so the scene's understood, and then it effectively does a video layer on top. So it's almost like an up-res of the thing, right? It knows where the objects are, it knows where they should be frame to frame, and then it compiles them into this well-lit situation. Maybe that's a better approach. We'll find out. If I was a betting man, I'd say you'll see something come out of Epic and Unreal Games eventually, or Unreal Engine.
I think I agree. I think, you know, we'll see how people solve this one. That was it in terms of the serious tests I had. Just as a little fun and to kind of play around with some of those.
Give us the bonus
input tools. The bonus is everybody knows like the Picard facepalm meme, and so I gave it the image of Picard face palming, and the prompt that he then plays peekaboo, and this is what we got.
I'm excited.
And it's like this cursed, like, uncanny valley Patrick Stewart.
Oh.
Yeah. And like the badge on his chest is like wrong because it was occluded in the original shot. So they had to like the model knew it was there. It had seen enough Star Trek to know the badge was there, know the shape, but it didn't know enough, right?
It also doesn't seem to know peekaboo necessarily.
No.
Just knew he was going to show his face.
And smile.
No crest white strips in the Star Trek universe.
No. So,
interesting.
I guess part of the conclusion here is that there's very high meme potential in the immediate term, and then also like Chris was saying earlier, there's like whether it's B-roll or I was saying storyboarding, or like I even think, revisiting the monkey photo for a second, I think you can make a pretty compelling nature documentary with AI, with Kling and 11 Labs, that people would watch.
And I will say on the Picard one, the clothing movement didn't look bad. It still tends to have this propensity for making things feel very solid. Mm-hmm. Like the fabric doesn't slump off, like my shirt, if I kind of bring my arms up, sort of stretches around. But it got some of that right on his arm as he moved. Look at that. It stretched down. It still has this press, this sort of kind of V of pressed fabric there. But assuming the shoulders were harder on the outfit, you could buy it. I also noticed on your coffee cup one, the professional one, the sail material was again heavy. It's like we're biasing towards very starched fabric or very heavy fabrics. The sails seem to be made out of, again, leather. Like it just seems like a very
it does look leather.
Very heavy sail. Super cool stuff. It's kudos to them that this is out there. Kudos to them you can use it. Is this ready for prime time? Absolutely not. But could you make some fun stuff? Get some views? Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think we're there for sort of, to your point, meme or social content that could get some attention. Do I think I'm going to see this in my next Netflix movie? No.
Not yet. But it does kind of, it does make me think a lot more about the future of like AI generated. If we're at, it's kind of having its like Dolly 2 moment or like its GPT-3 moment or something, right? And so it's like, fast forward a year or two, and we've seen how fast these things improve and how much better they get with scale and distillation and all these other things. And so, I don't know. I mean, like, to me, my biggest takeaway is we are all going to be watching some amount of AI-generated visual content pretty soon.
Yeah, and it's interesting that there's a geographic arbitrage here, right? You have countries that have different copyright rules. If this is coming out of China, you have very different copyright rules. You can see a lot more copywritten content showing up here. Mm-hmm. We didn't try any here. We don't want to get knocked down by the YouTube gods, but you could expect that that's an interesting difference, right? Why would I use one model over the other? The models coming out of China might be way more sort of buck wild. Just it'll use copyrighted material. It'll show you things from Disney characters or whatever you may see. You won't probably get that as much in the States, right? We have much bigger copyright protections. So there's a fascinating question of, do models end up having advantages because of the legal frameworks from the country they're originating from? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Seems like they might. It'll
be interesting to see how that all plays out. For now, I'm getting ready to make some AI memes.
Let's go.
And I think we're wrapping up here. So with that, if y'all enjoyed the video, definitely let us know. Let us know if there's any other AI tools you want us to check out. And
absolutely.
I think, like, in terms of a recommendation, I think you're going to have to make your own decision on this one. Like, it's not a nothing burger. The tool is here, and you've seen what type of stuff you can make with it. So if you find use with it, I would say, like, just be cognizant of the fact that they price their first month subscription at a huge discount to try to capture new users. And go for it. Make some videos. Share with us what you make. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching, everybody.